7 kilometers off Egypt's coast, a diver's lamp crossed a human face carved from red granite. The face was not attached to a shipwreck. It belonged to a colossal statue that had once stood at the entrance of an Egyptian temple. Around it lay broken columns, stone walls, anchors, ritual objects, and the remains of ships. There was only one problem. The entire city was beneath the Mediterranean Sea. For centuries, ancient writers described a wealthy port called Heracleion near the mouth of the Nile. Egyptian records appeared to mention another city called Thonis in the same region. Historians debated whether they were separate places, neighboring ports, or names preserved through legend. Then, in the year 2000, underwater archaeologists found a black stone monument standing in the ruins. Its hieroglyphs gave the city a name. Thonis, the lost Egyptian city, and the Greek city of Heracleion were the same place. And the evidence surrounding that inscription revealed something even more unsettling. This was not a small settlement swallowed by an accidental flood. It had been one of Egypt's most important gateways to the ancient world. Ships from across the Mediterranean entered the Nile through its harbors. Goods were inspected, taxes were collected, foreign merchants waited for permission to move deeper into Egypt. Then the ground beneath the city failed. If lost cities and discoveries beneath the sea are why you are here, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the first clue to what destroyed Thonis-Heracleion is still visible in the way its largest buildings fell. The ruins lie in Abu Qir Bay, between Alexandria and the Rosetta branch of the Nile, roughly 7 kilometers from the modern shoreline. In antiquity, the landscape looked completely different. Thonis-Heracleion stood near the canopic mouth of the Nile, once the river's most navigable western branch. The city was built across low islands, canals, basins, harbors, and unstable ground formed by layers of Nile sediment. This location made the city rich. It also made it vulnerable. Before Alexander the Great founded Alexandria in 331 BC, Thonis-Heracleion controlled one of the principal maritime entrances into Egypt. Foreign ships arriving from the Greek world and other parts of the Mediterranean could not simply sail inland. They passed through this port. The city became a customs gate, a trading center, and a point where Egyptian and Greek communities met. Hundreds of stone anchors have been found across the site. More than 70 ancient vessels have been identified in and around its harbors. Some vessels were abandoned, some were reused, and others sank while the port was still active. The seafloor preserves a city built around movement. Ships entered, cargo changed hands, taxes passed to the state and its temples. People from different languages and traditions lived beside the same canals, but trade was only half of the city's power. At its center stood the great temple of Amun-Gereb. The temple was connected with rituals of kingship. Pharaohs and later Ptolemaic rulers needed more than soldiers and inherited titles. They needed divine legitimacy. At Thonis-Heracleion, ceremonies associated with Amun helped present the ruler as Egypt's rightful king. That made the city more than a port. It was a place where economic control and sacred authority met. A ship entering Egypt passed through its waters. A ruler seeking divine approval entered its temple. Near that temple, archaeologists found 3 colossal statues that had once stood more than 5 meters high. One represented the god Hapi, the divine personification of the Nile's flood and abundance. Others represented a king and a queen. They had fallen into the same dark water that covered the city, but the object that confirmed the site's identity was smaller. In 2000, archaeologists recovered a black granodiorite stela nearly 2 meters high. It carried a decree issued under Pharaoh Nectanebo I in 380 BC. The decree ordered that a share of taxes collected on goods passing through the port should support the temple of the goddess Neith at Sais. Near the end, the inscription stated where a copy of the decree was to be erected: the city of Thonis. This was the same sacred center Greek sources called Heracleion. Not 2 cities, not similar names. The same port seen through two cultures. That single inscription solved an argument that had survived for centuries. But it also showed how much history can disappear when geography changes. The city had not vanished from every record. Its name survived in texts, its temples survived in stories, its role survived in tax laws and religious traditions. What disappeared was its location. Earlier searches concentrated on land because few expected an important Egyptian city to be sitting kilometers offshore. The sea had not erased Thonis-Heracleion. It had moved the map. When underwater archaeologist Frank Goddio and the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology began surveying the western part of Abukir Bay in the 1990s, they faced water with poor visibility and an enormous search area. They used sonar, magnetic surveys, precise positioning, and other geophysical methods to detect shapes buried under layers of mud. Slowly, a city emerged. Canals, harbor basins, temple walls, statues, anchors, gold coins, bronze objects, ceramics from Egypt and the Greek world, and ships preserved where ancient waterways had once carried them. The discoveries revealed a port more complex than the legends suggested. In some areas, Greek sanctuaries stood near Egyptian temples. A sanctuary dedicated to Aphrodite contained imported bronze and ceramic objects. Greek weapons found nearby support the presence of mercenaries who may have helped defend the entrance to Egypt. This was not a city divided cleanly between Egyptian and foreign life. It was a place where both worlds overlapped. The ships show the same mixture. Some were built using local Egyptian materials and methods. Others carried features associated with broader Mediterranean traditions. One vessel excavated at the site used acacia wood and a distinctive system of long internal tenons. Another discovery appeared to match a type of Nile cargo boat described by the Greek historian Herodotus in the 5th century BC. For centuries, some scholars questioned whether his description could be accurate. Then the mud preserved the evidence. They were not reading fantasy. They were reading a report about real Egyptian shipbuilding. But the city's wealth could not protect it from the ground beneath its temples. Here is where the popular version of the story becomes misleading. Thonis-Heracleion was not necessarily destroyed in one sudden night. Parts of it suffered violent disasters. Temple blocks collapsed. Ships were trapped beneath falling stone. Earthquakes and powerful waves affected the region. But the complete disappearance of the city appears to have been a process. The Nile Delta is built from sediment, carried and deposited by the river. In places, this waterlogged ground can remain stable until it is shaken or overloaded. During an earthquake, saturated sediment can lose strength and begin behaving like a liquid. This is called liquefaction. A stone temple may stand for centuries. Then the soil supporting it changes. Foundations sink, walls tilt, heavy blocks collapse. Land that seemed solid drops below the water. At Thonis-Heracleion, the weight of temples and buildings stood over unstable layers of clay and sediment. Seismic activity, floods, waves, gradual subsidence and rising water levels appear to have worked together. The first major destruction did not end the city completely. People continued to live and trade there through the Roman and Byzantine periods. Coins recovered from the site span more than 1,000 years. The port declined after Alexandria became the dominant center, but it did not simply disappear the moment the new city was founded. Thonis-Heracleion weakened in stages. Trade moved elsewhere. Buildings collapsed. Sections of land sank. Water advanced through streets and sacred areas. By around the 8th century AD, what remained had slipped beneath the bay. This slower explanation may sound less dramatic than a single catastrophic wave. It is actually more disturbing. The people of the city may have watched parts of their world become impossible to save. A temple could fall, while another district remained occupied. A harbor could become unusable, while homes still stood nearby. Families could move away knowing that the ground itself was no longer dependable. The city did not only die, it surrendered piece by piece. Now, does the discovery prove that ancient writers preserved every detail accurately? Number legends connected Heracles, Helen, and other famous figures with the port, but archaeology cannot confirm every story attached to the city. Does it prove that a mysterious civilization built monuments now hidden by a global flood? Number. The ruins belong to known Egyptian, Greek, Ptolemaic, Roman, and Byzantine history. The geological processes that submerged them are real and measurable, but that does not make the discovery ordinary. Thonis-Heracleion reveals how quickly an essential city can become almost invisible. For centuries, this port controlled access to Egypt. Its officials taxed Mediterranean trade. Its priests performed rituals linked to the ruler. Its canals carried ships from distant coasts. Its temples displayed statues weighing several tons. Then the shoreline moved. The river branch silted. The ground failed, and the center of power shifted to Alexandria. History continued without it. The sea preserved details that dry land often destroys. Under layers of mud, wooden ship parts survived. Gold remained where it fell. Ritual vessels stayed close to the temple. Anchors marked vanished docks. Columns lay beside the buildings they once supported. Recent excavations around the Temple of Amun have uncovered silver ritual instruments, gold jewelry, alabaster containers, and wooden structures beneath the temple floor. These objects do not belong to a city that existed only in myth. They belong to people interrupted by disaster. Someone placed perfume inside an alabaster vessel. Someone carried silver dishes into the temple. Someone secured a ship beside the harbor. Someone stood beneath the colossal statues before they fell. The city feels frozen, but it was never motionless. It was crowded, noisy, sacred, commercial, and alive. That is why one final question remains. How much of it is still hidden? Underwater excavation is slow. Mud must be removed carefully. Objects must be documented before currents disturb them. Metal, wood, and stone require conservation after centuries in salt water. Only a small portion of the ancient city has been examined in detail. Most of its streets, buildings, harbors, and buried layers remain below the bay. There may be more ships, more sanctuaries, more inscriptions, perhaps records naming officials, priests, merchants, or rulers. Perhaps evidence showing exactly when each district collapsed. The sea has already returned the city's name. It has not returned the entire story. Today, divers move through green water above the remains of the temple. Their lights pass over inscriptions once meant to face the sun. Fish swim between stones where priests performed ceremonies of kingship. The colossal statues no longer guard the entrance to Egypt. They lie in the world that replaced it. Thonis-Heracleion was not erased because it was imaginary. It was erased because the land beneath it stopped being land. And somewhere under the mud of Abukir Bay, the rest of the city is still waiting. The next investigation is waiting on screen now.